Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee. And the first item on our agenda is any apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. From Councillors Mary Jones and Richard Lewis.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a personal and prejudicial interest in items 2 and 4.
Yeah. Likewise, I have a personal interest in 2 and 4. And Councillor Downing?
Yeah, same, Chairman. 2 and 4, the main body.
Okay, thank you. No others? No. All right, that's done. Item 3 is the to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting as the correct record, and you'll find that on pages 1 to 4. So go to page 1 there, page 2, page 3, and page 4. If somebody'd move them as a true record, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. And item 4, any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No, Chair.
None. Thank you. Good. And so then we move on to item 5, is the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item there is the on page 8, the Rock and Fountain in at Craigkevin Park. And Simon, it's yours here.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, there are no updates for this application. The application is reported to the Planning Committee as the number of objections received has exceeded the committee threshold, and the application has been called to committee for decision by Councillor Bridget Rowlands. This is a full planning application for the change of use of the Rock and Fountain Public House in Craigkevin Park to a single 4-bedroom dwelling. No external alterations are proposed. Ian, if you just show the first slide. That's up. Okay. Properties already has management accommodation at first floor level. The pub car park is located to the north of the property there on the site plan and would have sufficient parking for the proposed dwelling use. The application site is located centrally within the village at the junction of Rhythwyn Road and Clydach Road. The 2-storey building occupies an elevated plot with views over the Clydach River Valley below. Ian, if you go to the second slide, it just shows the aerial image of the site with the car park to the north. And the next slide, please, Ian. That shows the proposed floor plan for the dwelling, which is a 4-bedroom property. And the next slide, Ian. That's just a street view image of the existing pub. This is the second planning application for this use, with the first being refused on the grounds that the development would result in the loss of a community facility of value, and it had not been demonstrated that the pub had been marketed for an appropriate period under normal market conditions, as the marketing period overlapped with COVID restrictions. The applicant appealed the decision, and the appeal was dismissed, and the inspector made a number of conclusions. Firstly, the inspector considered the pub is a community facility of local value. Secondly, the inspector considered other pubs in the locality, namely the New Inn in Clydach and the Mason's Arms, Rhydd y Pandy, were not relatively accessible and convenient for local residents in Craigkevin Park. Thirdly, the inspector was not persuaded that the evidence that the pub use was no longer viable and considered insufficient information had been provided to consider the future long-term viability of the pub. Finally, the inspector agreed with the council that the marketing period for the pub was not sufficient to constitute an appropriate period to find a buyer for the existing pub premises. The application was advertised by a site notice and neighbour letters. There have been 25 letters of objection and a petition with 40 signatures. The objections broadly reference the impact on the local community, express concerns regarding how the premises were run, and question whether the premises have been properly marketed. The key policy in the determination of this proposal is LDP policy SI2, which broadly seeks to retain local community facilities of value, provided the proposal would accord with the criteria of the policy. In view of the inspector's conclusions on the appeal, the key criteria to be addressed are criterion 3, which references the requirement to provide evidence the existing use is no longer viable, and criterion 4, which references the requirement to provide appropriate marketing evidence. In relation to criterion 3, the applicant has submitted a report by a firm of accountants to assess the pub accounts between 2016 and 2020 and to consider whether providing a food offering would be viable. While the business was profitable for 2 years prior to the pandemic, the accounts show losses over the 3 most recent years of trade, which indicates the pub was not viable even before the pandemic. The accountant's report considers that in light of the preceding years where the building made a loss, the applicant would not be able to raise the £60,000 necessary to upgrade the premises to provide food offering in order to compete with the Masons and the New Inn, which both offer food. Added to this are the more general challenges facing small businesses in terms of staff shortages and the current uncertain economic climate and rising energy costs. In light of the new information provided, officers consider that sufficient information has been provided to demonstrate the use is no longer viable in accordance with criterion 3. In relation to criterion 4, the supporting text of the policy requires a minimum marketing period of 12 months. The property has been marketed by reputable agents for 35 months since 2019 via a number of methods as set out within the officer report. Subsequent to COVID restrictions, the premises have been marketed continually for 16 months. Over the marketing period, a total of 8 viewing appointments have been made and over 140 requests for sales details. The asking price has been reduced by £15,000 since it was first marketed. One offer has been received, as advised in the report, but this was not accepted, and in any event, the potential buyer was not in a position to proceed with the sale. The current asking price for the premises is £260,000, and this is considered to be reasonable, having regard to advice provided by the Council's Estates section. In light of the above, it's considered the applicant has provided sufficient information to demonstrate that the premises has now been marketed for an appropriate period and at a reasonable price in accordance with the criterion of the policy. In summary, officers consider the new information provided does address the previous reason for refusing the application and does address the concerns raised by the inspector at the appeal. Whilst it's appreciated the loss of this community facility will be a significant concern to local residents, it's considered the proposed development would not conflict with LDP policy SI2 and is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. And got some speakers before us. First, I got first is Mr. Buxton. Yeah, got you 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, for giving us the opportunity of making some form of rebuttal. As we do seek you to refuse this planning application, as was done in the previous application. I have no intention of trying to talk you down for the full 5 minutes. I want to be brief. The issues are whether there is viability of that business and whether the marketing has been appropriate. There are some questions that arise about the full viability. We accept that there has been a reduction in the pub trade across the UK, both before and post-COVID, but even today's news is showing that one of the great survivors is the hospitality business. I believe nearly 400 new business pubs have been opened in the UK in the last year, as of this morning's BBC reports. We had, when it came to the papers, to look with some incredulity about some of the statements about income, even down to trying to suggest that the land registry had got the valuation wrong. Initially, that was listed as a £150,000 asset on the land registry, and I understand that the applicant was allowed to try and persuade the land registry and councillors that that was an error. In fact, Company's House had that at the time of his purchase as a registered asset with a mortgage on it at the Royal Bank of Scotland for £150,000. It seems to me that the difference between the £150,000 and the £235,000 that was allegedly spent at the time went down to a payment that the previous owners received in goodwill of £80,000. And that has been confirmed to me by the widow of the late proprietor. Seems to me that the value at the time was 150,000, and that's what the Royal Bank of Scotland thought it was worth, and it's certainly what the Land Registry actually put down as a result of the conveyancing documents. The actual planning Land Registry that you've referred to here is not accurate. The hashed red area is somewhat smaller than the actual true limit of the grounds, and I'm prepared to submit that if there's any member of the council that wishes to see it. There is considerable access to the side of the building on the southern side, which the landlord currently parks a caravan in. It's the second caravan he bought during the tenure. His 3 cars. He refers to expenditures in the grounds as to putting a new outbuilding in. That wasn't for the purpose of the pub, it was to house the Ducati motorbikes he'd bought. We agree and hear that, as the officer has said, that it's SI2, and the real element is that it is a valued asset of the community. There are not relatively accessible other venues without walking through unpaved lanes, largely still unlit, deteriorating with potholes despite the highway's best endeavours even recently. And even then, the viability of one of those establishments is not a given. So if we were to look at what the potential for the villagers in the near future is, that the lease on the new inn terminates in 3 years, and I understand that it's not going to be renewed by its owner. So there are areas there about the facilities, and I think it's accepted that it is a well-loved, cherished asset of the community, and have a few of our local SA6 residents here in support today. We looked fairly carefully through Companies House. There seems to be a considerable mismatch between what's declared income expenditures. In fact, the company has been dismissed, having in fact, there's a strike off for failure in compliance in certification, and that occurred within the first 18 months of his occupation of the premises, and he managed to survive that one, but it's been closed down as of July 2021. The trade fell away for the applicant. It was almost constructive. There's actual online paperwork from CAMRA for people who are supporting the local pubs, where they can see how to disinvest the interest in a pub from removing its jukebox to making things inhospitable. And we noted that there's a long list of things that he did to benefit the building. I think he was trying to justify the value of the building. But if we look at things like new fencing, cellar coolers, glass washers, these are all maintenance things that would have appeared. These are general repeatable issues on your business, on company accounts. It's not a permanent improvement. You know, it's just maintenance. Is the big main structural stuff that would have actually improved the value of the building? No. New outdoor furniture for the trade garden, that never existed. I mean, customers are here will tell you. Log burner installed, it suggests that he had paid for that by implication. It wasn't. By his own admission to me when I suggested that it was a bit on the small size for heating the building, he actually said it wasn't his choice because the money had been given to him by one of the brewery companies, and I won't name them, but that had been funded by one of his suppliers. A large shed outside bought and installed for additional storage space. Well, that was actually a garage for his Ducati motorbikes. We maintain that the value of that building is still only around £150,000. That's basically what it was sold for. There hasn't been any substantial improvement. The time that the market value has been allowed to adjust would see that, in fact, the building has gone from what might have been pleasantly shabby chic 3 years ago into something that is running into dereliction now. There'll be considerable financial input just to restore the building to what it was 3 years ago. We're not aware that he actually lives there. The potential for the pub to have been turned into a food venue would have meant using the management accommodation upstairs. That would have been eminently possible, seeing as the landlord actually had bought himself alternative residential accommodation at number 67,
now, please?
At seat number 67 Ridwan Road. The opportunities there to actually have developed a commercial food unit above the pub in the management centre, whilst he actually owned another residential property in the village, was therefore there. The viability has not really been tested on that. We do have some concerns that he's been able to use his own accountant's asset management, and Sydney Phillips
Can you wind up now, please?
have made a valuation on his request. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much. And then on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Bowen is with us. You've got your 5 minutes as well. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Bowen. No, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yep, there we are. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, can I say thank you to Mr. Davis and his staff for a thoroughly comprehensive report. It's disappointing when local facilities of importance close, whether that's a school, a library, a shop, or in this case, a public house. But unlike schools and libraries and publicly funded facilities, shops and pubs in this case rely on patrons spending money there. Therefore, and quite simply, the future of the pubs in our towns and villages depend upon people spending money there. In terms of the financial viability of this facility, the publicly produced accounts demonstrate that from 2017 this pub was failing, and from 2018 it was losing money. These accounts have been tested by an accredited accountant and submitted to Companies House through the due process. They have been tested by the council's internal mechanism to assess them, and as part of this application have been independently tested again by certified accountants. It's interesting to note that in 2021 the council accepted those accounts and resolved that the pub was not viable. Now, at appeal, as has been suggested, the inspector had questioned whether a food provision would indeed extend the viability of this public house. In response to that question raised, the applicant has spent a significant further amount of money to assess whether that indeed would be viable. The conclusion of the accountants were that due to the losses incurred by the pub, that the applicant would not be able to raise the necessary £60,000 to provide a food element. Hence, and as indicated by our officers, it has been clearly demonstrated that this pub is not viable. In terms of the marketing, the pub has been on sale since 2019, and that is a period of almost 3 years. It has been comprehensively advertised by a national company who specialise in this area. The council, as part of their report, have assessed that marketing campaign. They have assessed the offers made, as well as the asking price. And in all those areas, they have concluded that the requirements of the policy have been complied with. In summary, the pub is not viable. It has been adequately marketed, and whilst its closure is sad, it is interesting and important to note that patrons that formerly frequented this pub now go to 2 local pubs, thereby transferring their patronage and increasing the viability of those 2 remaining pubs. Therefore, Mr. Chairman and committee, I would invite you to accept the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one of the ward members is here to address this. Councillor Rowlands, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for listening to me today. The Rock and Fountain pub in Craigavon Park was once the life and soul of the village. It attracted all different members of the community. I have been contacted by numerous members of the community to ask you to reject this application to the change of the pub to a residential dwelling. In April 2021, a previous planning application for the same proposal was refused by this committee, and the planning inspectorate agreed that the application should be refused. We feel that this is still the case. Rock and Fountain pub was once a thriving pub. It was attended by numerous locals, and it was the beating heart of the community. We're all aware of the importance of the social interaction for our mental health and well-being. This has been proved and highlighted during and since the COVID pandemic. I can't stress to you all how important the pub is to the community for this very reason. Currently, the locals feel this facility of the village pub has been taken away from them for the simple reason that the current owner will not open the pub and is now applying for it to be turned into a solely residential dwelling. Granted, there are two other pubs within a 3-mile radius, the New Inn in Clydach and the Mason's Arms in Reedapandy. Both are accessible via roads that do not have full pavement access and do not have street lighting from Craigavon Park to both of the places. I ask you all if you visited the area on the dark winter's night and thought about the safety and dangers of people walking along these very dark, narrow roads that unfortunately also have a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit on them. This is what the residents of Craigavon Park will have to risk if they want an alcoholic drink, can't drive, and wish to meet with their friends, should the pub in Craigavon Park be closed for good. During the publicity period for this application earlier this year, I was contacted by a gentleman called Mr. Gary Thompson. He gave a statement saying that he had put an offer in to Sydney Phillips, the agents marketing the Rock and Fountain, on the 19th of August and offered £210,000 to purchase it. I submitted this email to Ginny Jones on the 6th of September, and I believe that all committee members should see this document before they make their decision. To me, this is vital evidence that the pub has a person who is willing to buy it and open it for the benefit of the community and to provide the village with a much needed social hub. Craigavon Park recently lost its primary school. Please don't allow it to lose its pub as well. I urge you all to reject this application. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. And now we will open up. Any members wish to speak? Anyone? No? No, sorry, Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You listened obviously to both sides what's been put forward here today. Clearly, the said it's a premises that is well thought of within the community and wants to keep things going, but clearly there seems to be a lack of support from the community to support the business going forward. And also, we've also heard as well from the gentleman who's come along today saying about the concern of the building going into perhaps disrepair. So clearly, I would have perhaps thought that rather than perhaps see a building going into disrepair, that some sort of a housing development which has been asked for goes there rather than the building left there for we don't know how long and falling into the actual disrepair. That is my concern for what I've heard today. Thank you, Chair.
For that, Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at the report on page 26, where it actually refers to the offer for £210,000 in August 2022, which was not accepted by the applicant, and it states that the potential buyer was not in a position to proceed at that time. I'm just querying, in terms of the financial assessment of the viability of the pub, as to whether or not there would be a potential buyer, is there a sort of floor in terms of how much it would be sold for? I mean, because it says further in the report that it was bought for £235,000. So if an offer came in under £235,000, would that then show that it was that was not a viable offer in any way in terms of the assessment we make, not as opposed to just what the buyer might want to accept in terms of a loss? It's just a question there. Thank you.
Councillor Downing, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I go along with what Mike White was saying about the deterioration of the building. It doesn't matter what anybody offers anybody for something. It's up to the owner to accept it or not. If he doesn't accept it and he keeps on refusing any offers, then this building would go into disrepair. The planning inspector said that the loss of the public house would have a detrimental impact upon the local community. So if the planning inspector, acting maybe on behalf of the Welsh Government, is so concerned that this is a community facility of local value. So two things: whether the people in the area could get together and form like a committee and make an offer for it, or maybe the Welsh Government would buy the building to keep it for the benefit of the local community. Otherwise, this building would deteriorate over the years, and then there'd be another petition coming in for us to knock it down. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I got no other speakers. No. Couple of things there, Simon. I think when they're viability and
Yeah, so
that's the main.
as Councillor Black pointed out, the report identifies that an offer's been made for £210,000. The pub was first marketed for £275,000 and was subsequently reduced to £260,000. We've had input from the council's estate department that consider that's a realistic assessment of the pub in terms of its value. So really, it boils down to the offers that's been made and whether that's a reasonable offer in regard to the value of the pub. So obviously the council can't influence that, but we can see that the current value of the pub that's been marketed at is reasonable in regard to the market.
So essentially, viability depends on a reasonable offer.
Well, the viability of the pub depends on the business.
Yeah, but in terms of whether or not it could continue as a pub, and whether or not someone was prepared to buy the pub, which is one of the criteria, reasonableness would actually come into that assessment.
I mean that would be for the buyer to have regard to the price that's being offered and whether it's a viable acquisition going forward.
I understand. I'm just thinking in terms of what the inspector said, in terms, whether reasonableness is actually part of that assessment. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay. No other hands up. No, sure. Okay, sorry, I'll be done. So the recommendation on page 28 is to approve the application. So we can take a vote on that now. Thanks, Gareth.
Yeah, so councillors Peter Black,
For
Phil Downing,
Or
Alan Jeffrey,
For
Sarah Keaton,
For.
Mike Lewis,
Or
Nicola Matthews,
For.
Mike White,
For
Andrew Williams,
for
and Paul Lloyd.
For.
That's unanimous. Chair.
Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. And then let's wait for people to leave. Okay, so then, sorry, we move on to item 2, which is on page 29, and that's Coed Bark Road and second. Simon.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There's one verbal update to report, and that's the inclusion of a condition, a recommended condition in relation to facilitating the Welsh language through the development. This is referenced within the officer report, but was not included in the list of conditions. That's an error in the report. This application is reported to committee as the number of dwellings proposed would exceed the committee threshold as set out within the council's constitution. Members may recall the application was previously reported to the Planning Committee but was deferred in April of this year with a recommendation of refusal for 7 reasons relating to matters associated with residential amenity, highway safety, lack of affordable housing provision and lack of education contribution. When the application was reported to committee in June, it was agreed the application would be reported back to the Planning Committee when negotiations had concluded. In order to address the previous reasons for refusal, the plans have been revised to provide balconies at first floor level for the flats, and the boundary treatments for the flats have been amended to improve outlook. Concerns relating to the privacy of the occupiers of the flats has been addressed by proposing obscure glazing. There have been no substantial changes to the scheme to address previous concerns in relation to the lack of outlook and small gardens of several of the plots. However, a further officer site visit has been undertaken to reassess the affected plots, and in the overall planning balance, these are considered to be acceptable. Importantly, in relation to Section 106 contributions, the applicant has submitted viability information on an open book basis, and there has been extensive dialogue with the LPA's strategic planning and placemaking section in this respect. The viability discussions have now concluded, with the applicant offering 10% intermediate affordable housing provision and a full education contribution of £184,756. Proposed development is for the construction of 55 dwellings with associated infrastructure on land that formerly accommodated a concrete pipe works. The housing mix would be a mix of 2 4-bed dwellings, 12 3-bed dwellings, 35 2-bed dwellings and 6 2-bed flats. Ian, if you could go to the next slide, please. Coedbach is located to the southeast of the site. Sorry, Coedbach Park is located to the southeast of the site. Vehicle and pedestrian access would be from Llys Morfudd on the northwestern side of the site. An active travel route is proposed along the eastern side of the site. Current slide shows the site in 1999 with the work still in place centrally within the site that Ian's pointing to there. This has now been demolished. You'll note the area to the north of the site in that image is covered in greenery. If you show the next slide, please, Ian, that's the updated position. There are traces of the former building on the site, and to the north you can see recent residential developments taking place to the south of Tesco's. Next slide, please, Ian. The next slide shows the vehicle access to the proposed development site off Llys Morfudd. This isn't included within the current application. However, the LPA is currently considering a separate planning application for the access to the site, which has previously been approved. If committee resolves to approve this application, conditions recommended requiring the access to be implemented prior to any other development works on the site. The bottom photo taken there is from Coedbach, with the red arrow indicating the active travel entrance link to the site. The application was advertised by a press notice, site notices and neighbouring properties were individually consulted. 13 letters of objection have been received, raising various matters, including impacts on trees and biodiversity, traffic congestion, impact on existing infrastructure and impacts during construction works. Ponsterdale Ice Town Council have objected due to impacts on existing infrastructure. Sustrans objected to the lack of active travel measures for the development. However, development would not impact upon any future plans Sustrans may have to the south of the site, and the scheme includes an active travel link through the site. The key LDB policies that are relevant to the consideration of this proposal are PS2, placemaking and place management, together with the topic-specific policies relating to highway safety and the environment referenced within the officer's report. Council's placemaking supplementary planning guidance is also an important material consideration. The main issues in terms of consideration of this application is whether a submitted scheme would accord with national planning policies and LDP policies in relation to placemaking, impacts upon amenity, highway safety, affordable housing and the environment generally. In terms of the principle of the development, the site is within the urban area within the LDP and therefore falls to be considered as a windfall housing site, which is acceptable in principle, subject to considerations against topic-specific policies in the LDP. Ian, if you could go to the next slide, please, which is the layout, proposed layout of the development. The development will provide a further extension to the new housing to the north and will provide an active travel link through the site to Coedbach. The scheme has been through a number of iterations in order to address various concerns as set out within the officer report. The scheme proposes a number of small cul-de-sacs accessed off the main spine street. There is no vehicle through route through to Coedbach. Corner turning house types would be deployed at important junctions within the development in order to provide active frontages and enliven the street scene. Parking provision is located mainly to the sides and along the frontages. One parking court is proposed with 10 cars in the southern part of the site, but this is well overlooked by adjacent properties and has allowed parking to be taken off the main spine street. Tree planting and green verges have been introduced into the development to provide green infrastructure at the street level and to provide connections with the surrounding GI network. The house types proposed within the development are similar to those on other sites within Swansea by the developer Highgrove Homes. The development would all be two-storey with a mix of brick and stone frontages. The flats would be brick with through colour render and balconies to the rear. Ian, could you just flick to the elevations? So that's the elevations of the flats, and there's also that's a street scene image which also shows a couple of the house types proposed within the development. While there are some aspects of the development that could be improved, such as the dominance of frontage parking in certain areas, such as the Northern Spur, and the tightness of the layout in some areas, overall, on balance, the proposed house types and layout are considered to be satisfactory. Ian, if you could jump to the tree impact. The trees around the site will be retained for the most part, with only 2 individual C category trees proposed to be removed to facilitate the access. Those can be seen, they're the ones nearest, the 2 nearest the access road there, that's it, hashed in red. Other smaller trees and scrub around the periphery of the site will be laid and pruned to provide a green edge to the development in the form of a compact hedgerow. They're also identified in red on that plan. This will be supplemented with additional tree planting around the site, as indicated on the landscaping plan, which is on the next slide, Ian. There you can see proposed tree planting along the northern and western edges of the development. And then around the remainder on the eastern side, you've got the hedge that would be laid around the development. A site of this scale should provide a local area of play and local equipped area of play, as well as contribution towards a multi-use games area. In this instance, there is no formal open space on site, albeit 2 small incidental areas of open space either side of the flats are proposed as pocket parks, along with one on the northern side of the entrance. As indicated within the officer report, separate to this application, Coedbach Park has been upgraded and further funding has been provided for enhancements to the park. As such, it would not be reasonable to require an off-site contribution for upgrades to play facilities in the absence of a leap on site. In terms of residential amenity, the officer's report sets out that satisfactory separation distances would be maintained to existing properties around the development to the north and east. Separation distances internally within the site are generally in accordance with the placemaking SPG. There are some instances within the site where back to side separation distances would be less than the 15 metres advised within the SPG. However, given this application was submitted before the current SPG, plus that it only affects a small number of properties, this is considered to be acceptable on balance. The internal size of the house types has been assessed against the standards within the placemaking guidance SPG and are considered to be acceptable. Concerns raised when the application was previously reported to committee have broadly been addressed by alterations to the scheme. Moreover, an officer site visit has been undertaken to fully assess the residual impacts upon the future occupiers. For example, where some plots on the periphery of the site have non-standard garden shapes. Overall, on balance, it's considered that the future occupiers of all plots would benefit from satisfactory light, outlook and satisfactory usable amenity space, as set out within the report. In terms of access and highway safety, the local highways authority considers that the development can be accommodated on the highway network without impacting on the tidal reach junction. Vehicle traffic tracking information has been submitted, which demonstrates that the layout is tight in places but can function without any detrimental highway safety or pedestrian safety impacts. This has addressed the previous recommended reason for refusal. Reduced car parking provision is applicable to this site given its sustainable location close to existing shops and services. The local highway authority considers the levels of parking provision to be appropriate. As indicated above, a condition is recommended regarding the provision of satisfactory access to the site off Llys Morfudd prior to any other development works. The applicant has indicated that the streets would be offered for adoption. A condition is recommended in relation to the future management and maintenance of the roads should they not be offered or accepted for adoption. The site is bordered by the Winegron Marsh Sink. As indicated above, there are some tree removals and tree works on the boundary of the site, and a condition is recommended for tree protection measures for those to be retained. There are slowworm and common lizard on the site, and these will be moved to a receptor site within the sink. This is a condition of the permission. Invasive non-native species such as Japanese knotweed and Himalayan balsam will also be dealt with by the condition for their eradication and management. The development includes biodiversity enhancements such as hedgehog gaps, bat and bird boxes, and native planting. In relation to Section 106 requirements, since the application was deferred in April, viability discussions have continued with the applicant. In relation to education, there are identified capacity issues at Ponstellise Comprehensive, and the developer has agreed to fund full contribution to allow for improved capacity at this school. This has addressed one of the previous reasons for refusal. As indicated within the officer report, contribution towards the English medium primary school is not considered to be justified. In relation to affordable housing, it's proposed to provide 6 two-bed flats with intermediate tenure. This will provide 10% affordable on the site, but would not meet the 15% target policy requirement under policy H3. Moreover, the greatest demand is for social rented tenure in this area. The housing officer has reviewed the proposals and has offered no objection to the level or type of affordable housing being proposed, on the basis that it be demonstrated that viability would not allow for a policy compliant level to be achieved on the site. A thorough review of the applicant's viability assessment has been undertaken using the council's development viability model. The review has confirmed that the viability of the site is challenging and would yield a profit margin in the region of 12.3% on GDV when taking into account the offered 10% affordable housing provision and education contribution. Planning guidance suggests a viable profit margin for developers should not fall below 15% GDV. On this basis, the level and type of affordable housing on the site is considered to be acceptable, as the scheme could not bear any increase in provision. Matters relating to Welsh language impacts, coal mining legacy at the site, land contamination, drainage and flooding have all been dealt with in detail within the officer's report, having regard to the advice of consultees, and are considered to be acceptable in accordance with LDP policies subject to conditions. Overall, therefore, on balance, the scheme is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and subject to securing the planning obligations through a Section 106, as referenced within the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again, Simon. And then we have the agent wish to address this. Geraint, John, how are you?
Good, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. The recommendation before you is, of course, one for approval. As such, I'll keep my address brief and will focus on the lengths gone to in dialogue with officers as opposed to the detail, not least as Mr. Hughes' comprehensive verbal account has covered this in some detail. As you'll see a note from the detailed and comprehensive report before you, officers have closely and carefully assessed the planning application in arriving at this recommendation. Detailed dialogue between the applicant and your officers has taken place over the 4 years since the application was submitted in December 2018. As the report clarifies and as officers have set out, the application forms the 4th phase of the ongoing wider development at this site and location. Members may recall, as Mr. Hughes pointed out, that the application was reported to committee earlier this year in April and was deferred to allow further time for the applicant to work with officers to overcome the considered deficiencies with the scheme at that time. As a result of detailed dialogue and revised submissions, you'll see that the application is now being recommended for approval by your officers. This is a product, and I should stress, a product of the applicant working tirelessly in conjunction with officers who have devoted considerable time to this, to overcome each and all of the concerns previously raised. It can, of course, be concluded from this that every aspect of the development has been looked at in considerable detail and is now found to be acceptable. In particular, considerable work has been put into placemaking to ensure that the scheme creates a pleasing, sustainable and desirable place to live, which provides considerable green infrastructure both on and off-site. As can be noted from the appraisal and assessment section of the report, beginning on page 67, officers consider the scheme to be acceptable in the following respects: the principle, placemaking design and layout, neighbouring and residential amenity, highway safety, parking and active travel, trees, ecology and green infrastructure, education, affordable housing, coal mining, contaminated land, drainage and flooding, Welsh language and all other material considerations. As I say, the position in respect to these detailed matters and the scheme overall is the product of considerable and detailed dialogue between the applicant and your officers. Revisions have been made to the scheme where officers have considered these to be necessary. This results in a proposal that is, of course, recommended for approval. Insofar as scheme viability is concerned, and the position in respect to affordable housing and education provision, the applicant, as you'll note from the report and Mr. Hughes' summary, and notwithstanding scheme viability establishing potentially otherwise, the applicant has made provision for these. 10% affordable housing is proposed, which equates to 6 units, whilst a sizable education contribution is made of circa £185,000. This is a product of and demonstrates the applicant's long-term commitment both to this site, the scheme and the community. To conclude, therefore, and having regard to the planning balance, it should of course be appreciated that the proposals will see the redevelopment of previously developed land in the urban boundary and will deliver much needed high quality and sustainable housing. On this basis, I respectfully urge you to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, local members with us anyway. Councillor Downing first, and then I got Councillor Keaton. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I point out that I am a town councillor, but I did not take part in the debate leading to the objection from the town council, and this is recorded in their minutes. Going on to the application, first of all, I understand and appreciate all the work our officers have put into this over the years to come to the conclusion here today on a very, very difficult site. And obviously, to echo this, how difficult it was, it's taken nearly 4 years. And a lot of to-in and fro-in has been pointed out between the developer and the officers. But I think the right decision has come today. I've only got one question, really, because been involved with it throughout the years. A lot of questions have been asked about it. But with regards to the 106 that they have to sign within the 6 months, if I missed it, I apologise, but if I haven't, there are no trigger points that we normally see with a 106 financial contribution. So if that can be clarified, then I'm more than happy to agree the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you so much. Councillor Kitten?
There we go. Sorry about that, Chair. Yeah, just a concern. The gardens seem incredibly small. How do they fit in the rain gardens for drainage for the suds in these spaces? They are still doing those, yes?
We come back with that in the mo. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Anything else? Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Cheers. Any other contributions? Councillor White?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in regards to the 106 again contribution in which Councillor Down has raised, can I just perhaps clarity that obviously there's been decided that the English primary obviously is now not getting the original 106 contribution. The local authority have obviously addressed the issue with the play area of equipment and that by the funding that the local authority put in and through the grant obtained by the local member. But that the £184,000, that will be the figure that will be paid, and there'll be no sort of asking if that could be reduced in any way. Thank you, Chair.
You have got no other hands up to speak? No? Okay, just do section 106 trigger points and this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, there's been no trigger points indicated within the report. That would be something that we would discuss with the applicant further as part of the 106, signing the 106. And as part of that, we would also possibly involve the applicant, but also the education officer as well, just to ensure that the trigger points are satisfactory in order to ensure that the funding is provided in a sort of phased manner that everyone is happy with.
Yeah, another one was
in terms of the question in terms of the gardens, I mean this has been something that has been discussed in great detail with the applicant. They've submitted information to demonstrate that the garden sizes would accord with the council's SPG. So that the minimum that we would normally request is that the garden area should be no less than the footprint of the building. Reference to the site plan would show that the vast majority of plots, particularly centrally within the site, have got good sized gardens. It's around the edges where they become a little bit more squeezed, but the actual size of the gardens would still accord with the SPG guidance. In terms of the SUDs, this is a pre-SUD scheme, so that there isn't a requirement for SUDs to be provided as part of this application because it was submitted back in 2018. So that's not a requirement, but in any event that the council is, or the LPA is satisfied that the garden sizes would be sufficient and would provide sufficient sitting out area, etc. And it's also got to be remembered that the site is very close to Coedbach Park, which again provides a large amenity area for the local community. In terms of the Councillor White's query on the education contribution, that contribution is fixed. It's within the recommendation, and it's been agreed as being provided by the applicant. So that wouldn't change.
Councillor Downing, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just on that, Chair, can members be informed of the trigger points when they've been agreed?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. I got no other member wish to speak. And so we can move to that recommendation, which is one to approve the application. When you're ready, Gareth, please.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Phil Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Sarah Keaton,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Nicola Matthews,
For.
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams,
For.
Paul Lloyd.
For. Thank you.
That's unanimous again.
So that's carried again. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right, thank you very much. And so we move on to item 3 now, which is page 95, which is the application at the Grand Hotel. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Maybe? Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members. There are no updates to this report regarding this application. This application seeks full planning permission for the refurbishment and construction of a 4-storey rear extension, rooftop bar and roof terrace extension to the existing hotel to facilitate the provision of 42 additional bedrooms and ancillary accommodation at the Grand Hotel High Street, Swansea. The application is referred to Planning Committee as it exceeds the threshold of the provision of a building or buildings where the floor space to be created by the development is 2,000 square metres or more. The application site comprises of a 4-storey building that currently operates as a hotel and which includes residential, leisure and conference facilities. The hotel is located within the city centre and is situated on a prominent junction with Ivy Place and High Street, directly opposite Swansea Central train station, and is surrounded by a number of mixed uses, including shops, offices and student accommodation. Next slide, please, Ian. The application site adjoins the side elevation of the premises known as the Elysium Building and immediately adjoins the Quaker Meeting House site to the rear, which has an associated burial ground. Pedestrian and vehicle access to the site is via both Ivy Place and High Street, and due to its central location is well served by public transport. Next slide, please, Ian. The photographs on the screen are of the existing Grand Hotel building and the buildings and uses that currently adjoin and surround the application site, such as Swansea Central train station, the Elysium Building and the recent Seren Building located on Mariners Street. Next slide, please, Ian. The proposal seeks consent to add an additional floor space of 2,728.7 square metres to provide the 42 additional rooms and ancillary accommodation to the hotel, which includes a residence lounge, a reconfigured banquet room, as well as an office, laundry room and goods lift, which seeks to upgrade the overall quality of the existing tourism accommodation. Next slide, please, Ian. The external alterations will comprise of a 4-storey rear extension located on top of an existing building which currently comprises the banquet hall, and the introduction of a 5th floor that would be set back from the main facade of the building and which will be finished in vertical seam cladding and smooth render. Next slide, please, Ian. The application also proposes an extensive green sedum roof and a living green wall with external trim on the western elevation facing High Street and associated signage. No public letters of objection have been received regarding the proposed development. The main issues for consideration, therefore, are the principle of the use, the impact upon visual amenity and impact upon the residential amenities of any neighbouring occupiers and future occupiers of the hotel accommodation, ecology, archaeology, waste, parking and highway safety. As the current use of the building subject to this application is as a hotel, the principle of its extension to create additional rooms and facilities within the city centre is considered acceptable. The proposed development is considered to contribute towards the regeneration of the retail centre and helps to provide a wide range and choice of visitor attractions and facilities in the central area, in line with the LDP policies and the aims of the SCARF document. Furthermore, the application is within a strategic development area which seeks to add and diversify the leisure uses on High Street. The proposal is in a sustainable location within the settlement, which is considered an acceptable location for additional tourism accommodation. The application would also support the aims of Welsh Government to promote and recover the tourism industry as part of Wales's post-COVID-19 recovery, and would accord with policy TR1, which supports proposals by improving the quality and range of attractions, accommodation and services on offer. It is therefore considered that the principle of the extension of the existing hotel accommodation and this location is acceptable and in compliance with the aims and objectives of the Swansea LDP plan. Ian, please can we go back to the previous slide showing the front elevation of the building? With regard to visual amenity, the proposed development is considered to reflect the existing design of the host building and is in keeping with the design of the existing character and appearance of the immediate street scene, albeit the majority of the extension will be located to the rear of the building. The symmetrical design of the original elevation, which is a key gateway building opposite Swansea railway station, seeks to enhance the proposals as a high-quality, carefully designed addition to a prominent city centre building. The Council's Placemaking and Heritage Officer also supports the proposal. Okay, back to the other slide, please, Ian, for the living wall. The introduction of a green living wall on the western elevation not only creates visual interest, but adds to the biodiversity and sustainability of the development. The proposals are considered to improve the quality of this part of the city centre by providing improved active frontages and enhancing the public realm via the relationship and interaction with Swansea railway station, which is located opposite the application site. The proposed external alterations and materials to the building are considered acceptable, and the addition of the rooftop bar and terrace extension will be set back from the main facade of the building, so will not be highly visible from the street. Additional information is required to be submitted regarding the details and maintenance of the green roof and green living wall, as well as finished materials such as windows, Juliet balconies and balustrade, which will be controlled via condition. The proposed development is therefore considered acceptable and has no adverse impact on the visual amenity of the host building, the street scene or surrounding area, and therefore accords with the LDP policies. In relation to residential amenity, the application property is located on a busy highway within the city centre, while some disturbance is inevitable and to be expected through the day and night. Whilst this in mind, residents who live in close proximity to mixed use or commercial premises cannot reasonably expect the same level of peace and quiet as people living in a wholly residential area. As such, it is not considered there will be any detrimental impact on the living conditions of any neighbouring residents in the apartments around the application site. The Council's Pollution Control Officer has been fully consulted and no objection has been raised subject to a condition requiring the submission of a noise impact assessment prior to the commencement of development for the control of all internal and external noise in relation to the proposed hotel bedrooms. It is therefore considered that the proposal would not give rise to any significant or harmful impact on the amenity that short-term guests should reasonably expect within this city centre location. There are no objections regarding parking and highway safety due to the sustainable location of the application site opposite the train station and location near city centre car parks. However, due to its prominent location on a busy junction within the city centre and opposite the train station, it is considered necessary to attach a condition requesting the submission of a construction method statement, which will seek to reduce the likelihood of obstruction of the highway and danger to road users during the construction works at the site. Next slide, please, Ian. With regard to waste management, whilst the concerns raised by Highways regarding waste collection at the site have been noted, the submitted plans do demonstrate an existing and proposed bin storage area located within the curtilage of the site, and as indicated on the screen by a red arrow. The applicant's agent has confirmed that the waste is currently collected by Brown's Waste Recycling, with general waste collected 4 times a week and recycling collected twice a week. In view of this, it's considered necessary to attach a condition requiring the submission of a waste management plan, setting out the applicant's plans to manage, store and dispose of the additional waste generated from the site by the proposed development and to address the concerns raised by the highway officer. Accordingly, there's no drainage, ecology, archaeology or highway safety concerns have been raised in relation to the proposal, subject to conditions, and have been addressed in detail within the officer's report. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to compliance with the conditions set out within the agenda bar. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. Councillor White, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, in regards to the construction method statement, said you're waiting for a report on this. My concern, obviously, is right on the main access into the multi-storey car park, and also what in regards to the works site itself, would we have plans in place for, say, a compound area for materials and storage of equipment? Would we have to have permission, possibly off Network Rail, because the car park right on the side of the Grand Hotel is obviously that's owned by British Rail. So when we need to obviously ask if we need to have permission, if the applicant needs to have permission for on that. And in regards to, as I said, for a compound area. And secondly, would there be a stipulation put in place regarding having a fire escape? Because you've got an additional 4 levels now of these new apartments. Would there be a need to look at perhaps in regards to fire safety than that for actually a fire escape? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question in relation to the archaeological conditions. I understand we're asking for a watching brief just in case they do unearth anything. Do the details of that watching brief have to be submitted prior to them starting work, or we were just going to let them get on with it?
Just 2 points there, Hayley, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With regard to Councillor White, the construction method statement is required under condition 9, which addresses all the points that you've raised in terms of site compound, where the materials will be delivered. I'm assuming it's a highway condition, so we would seek the compound to be included within the curtilage of the site, or as best as possible, not to affect Network Rail in any way. I don't know whether Matthew wants to come in further on that and explain that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. It's just something that we include where people are developing off an existing access. They'd be required to discharge a condition before starting work to make sure that we're content that they can carry out their construction operations without affecting the highway, car parks, or anything else. So that will have to contain full details of any compound deliveries, what kind of materials they're using, any plant accesses for men, materials, everything, which we'd have to be happy with before we discharge the condition to let them start.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. With regards to Councillor White's second point about fire escapes, that would be looked at under the building control regulations and issues when they have to apply for building control permits and permissions. So that's something they would look into. With regards to Councillor Black's point, the condition 6 refers to the watching brief, and the wording says no development shall take place until that's been submitted and agreed before any work can start on site. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just a general comment, Chair. I think 42 beds is seems to be an ideal addition to the accommodation in Swansea, because we seem to be much of a shortage in terms of that kind of accommodation. Thank you.
Definitely a shortage. Yeah, thank you. No other comments? Anyone wish to speak? No? Okay. So then, again, we move to the recommendation, which is one to approve. And we take a vote on that now.
Yeah, Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
For.
Sarah Keaton.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul White.
And for.
Unanimous again, Chair.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Carried that. And then the final item is item 4, and that's up over to Upper Bank. Thank you very much. That's yours again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There are no updates for this item. The application is reported to committee as the number of dwellings proposed would exceed the committee threshold as set out within the council's constitution. The proposed development is for the construction of 30 new 2-bed flats arranged within 4 blocks, comprising of 3 three-story blocks and 1 2-story block. Ian, showing the first slide. Okay, thanks. This is phase 9 of Highgrove Homes Brunel Wood development and is located at the northern end of the site. Next slide, please, Ian. More of a shopping park, including Morrison's, is located to the northwest, with Pluck Lake to the north, as you can see on the overhead image there. Access to the site would be derived from the consented access road off Nantong Way. And next slide, please, Ian. This slide's taken from Nantong Way, looking towards the site. The development will be on the right-hand side of the brick enclosure in the foreground. The application's been advertised by a site notice. A press notice has also been issued, which will expire on the 19th of December. One letter of objection has been received, raising matters including lack of parking, overlooking of existing properties, the narrow nature of the roads within the development, and impacts on parking of existing properties. The key LDP policies that are relevant to the consideration of this proposal are PS2, placemaking and place management, together with the topic-specific policies relating to highway safety and the environment referenced within the officer's report. Council's placemaking supplementary planning guidance document is also an important material consideration. The main issues in terms of the consideration of this application, therefore, are whether the submitted scheme would accord with national planning policies and LDP policies in relation to placemaking, impacts upon residential amenity, highway safety, affordable housing, and the environment generally. In terms of the principle, the site is within the urban area within the LDP and therefore falls to be considered as a windfall housing site, which is acceptable in principle, subject to consideration against the topic-specific policies within the LDP. The application site is prominent when viewed from Nantong Way and forms a gateway into the Brunel Wood development. The blocks would form an enclosure around a central landscape parking area. Ian, do you want to go to the next slide, please? The blocks would form an enclosure around a central landscape parking area and would address the surrounding streets on all sides. The block types have been amended through discussions with the placemaking lead in order to ensure active frontages in key locations. Ian, if you could just show the visuals for the blocks, probably the next slide again. There you go. Inclusion of gabled features, the mix of materials including stone, render and brick, and the provision of balconies will provide visual interest and will serve to break up the mass of the blocks. While the choice of materials will be consistent with the housing within earlier phases of the Brunel Wood development. Parking would be overlooked and the landscaping is proposed within the grounds to provide open space and ecological value. The officer's report sets out that satisfactory separation distances would be maintained to existing properties around the development. The upper floor flats would benefit from balconies, whereas the ground floor flats would have access to private amenity areas. There would also be communal landscaped areas within the site. The accommodation itself would provide for satisfactory outlook. Flats are also considered to be of an acceptable size in accordance with the placemaking guidance SPG. The Local Highways Authority considers that car parking levels are appropriate and the access points and the internal street layout are considered acceptable. The developers indicate the streets would be offered for adoption. However, a condition is recommended to confirm future management and maintenance regimes for the streets. In terms of ecology, the site's located entirely within the Pluck Lake Lower Swansea Valley sink under LDP policy ER6. However, the ecology survey submitted with the application found that much of the site is of low ecological value. The council's ecologist has requested a condition relating to mitigation and compensation for the loss of sink habitat. It's considered a suitably worded condition with regards to landscaping, together with other ecological enhancement features such as bat and bird boxes, will provide satisfactory compensation and enhancements. In relation to Section 106 requirements, there's been no request for an education contribution on the basis that there is sufficient capacity within catchment schools. In terms of affordable housing, there is a 10% target plus policy requirement under LDP policy H3 for this area, which equates to 3 homes. It would be difficult to integrate 3 units within the proposed flatted development in terms of management, maintenance and service charges. As such, an off-site contribution may be more appropriate in this instance. Notwithstanding this, the scheme proposes no affordable housing provision. The applicant has provided a viability assessment, which provides a breakdown of external costs, abnormal costs, and costs associated with professional fees. This information has been reviewed by the Placemaking and Strategic Policy section. using the council's development viability model. The evidence indicates the development, without any affordable provision, would yield a forecasted developer profit of below 10% GDV. This is well below the minimum 15% profit margin suggested as reasonable within planning guidance. On this basis, the provision of a policy-compliant level of affordable housing in the form of an off-site contribution would make the scheme unviable to develop. The scheme would provide relatively affordable market housing within a sustainable location and would otherwise be consistent with LDP policies. On this basis, having regard to the viability exercise, it's considered that the proposed development would not conflict with the requirements of LDP policy H3, which seeks target percentages of affordable housing subject to viability considerations. Matters relating to coal mining legacy at the site, land contamination, open space and drainage have all been dealt with in detail within the officer's report, having regard to the advice of consultees, and are considered to be acceptable in accordance with LDP policies subject to conditions. Overall, therefore, the scheme is recommended for approval subject to conditions and subject to no further material issues being raised within the press notice consultation that have not already been raised and considered within the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again. Thank you very much. And Mr. John, you've got opportunity to address this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Thanks again for the opportunity. Again, the recommendation before you is one of approval. And again, given the detailed overview by Mr. Hughes, I'll keep this brief accordingly. Again, as you'll see a note from the detailed and comprehensive report before you, officers have closely and carefully considered the planning application in arriving at their recommendation. Detailed dialogue between the applicant and your officers has taken place over the 8 months since the application was submitted in April. As the report clarifies and as officers have set out, this application forms the 9th phase of the ongoing Upper Bank development. As can be seen and noted from the appraisal and assessment section of the officer's report, beginning on page 138, officers consider the scheme to be acceptable in respect to the principle of development and a host of, indeed all, other technical material considerations. As I say, the position in respect to these detailed matters and the scheme overall is a product of considerable and detailed dialogue, revision and amendment to the scheme in discussion between the applicant and your officers. Revisions have been made to the scheme where officers have considered these to be necessary. This includes in particular enhancement to the external areas of the scheme and, more importantly, the provision of balconies to the upper units. Insofar as scheme viability is concerned and the position in relation to affordable housing, the applicant would have preferred to have made provision for this as it has done on other parts of the scheme. Scheme viability means, however, that this is not possible in this instance. This has been the subject of independent appraisal and detailed scrutiny, of course. Notwithstanding this, and as the report makes clear, the proposed development would still make a material contribution to the range and choice of housing supply in this area, and moreover, at a relatively affordable price. To conclude, therefore, and having regard to the planning balance, it should of course be appreciated that the proposals will see the redevelopment of a previously developed site to deliver much needed high quality and sustainable affordable housing accommodation, even if that is in its nature rather than its controlled tenure. On this basis, I respectfully urge and ask you to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application accordingly. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillor White, I saw your hand up, didn't I? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point the clarity, Chair, obviously the 19th of December is the closing date for this application. It's the 6th day. Where do we as a committee stand now regarding if there are any further comments in regards to this application? Can we have clarity on that, please?
If anything is received, Councillor, that hasn't already been addressed in the report, then we would have to report it back to next committee. But if it's already been addressed in the report and members are happy with that today, then it would be delegated to the head of service to issue the decision.
So Downing?
Yeah, same sort of question, Chair. Was the press notice late going in? And the other thing is, if for argument's sake tomorrow all the boxes were ticked, could the developer start work, or has he got to wait until the 19th? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, the notice was late going in. It should have gone in when the application was received, and we picked it up in the signing off process that it hadn't been done. But until the permission is issued, the actual decision notice, planning permission hasn't been granted. So it would only be after the 19th. If there's no objections and the notice is issued, that's when planning permission will be granted.
Okay. Okay, I think, yeah. Come to that now. No other member wish to speak? No, I can't see any other hands up. Yeah, I only speak as one of the ward members. Obviously, the whole site of the scheme, you know, is really coming along, and for us, it representing the ward, you know, there's a great demand for housing in the ward. So, for me, you know, I welcome it. But that's for the committee to decide on whether they want to approve or not. I can't see any hands up now. Oh, sorry, Al. Yeah.
Just one concern. I can see that this development is very close to this. Is it Pluck Lake? Very Lake. I wonder, has there been any infrastructure sort of established to do well for the safety of children anywhere near this this water? Because where you've got children and water, I mean, there's an element of danger there.
Yeah, Pluck Lake, I believe, is used by Brynmill Fishing Club. So, yeah, that's right. No other hands up there. Beg your pardon. Good. Councillor Downing coming back in?
No, sorry, Chair. I can't see the bottom of my screen, so I don't know if my hand has gone down or not. I'll try again. Okay, it's gone.
There you are. Thank you.
Marvellous.
Okay, thank you. Good. No other member wish to speak, so we'll be take a vote again. But as you say, on page 144, it does explain, but it's approved subject to the notice expiring on the 19th, and any matters that may arise in between. So on that basis, we'll take that vote. And now, thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, Phil Downing,
For,
Alan Jeffrey,
For
Sarah Keaton,
For,
Mike Lewis,
or
Nicola Matthews,
For,
Mike White,
for
Andrew Williams,
for
Paul Lloyd.
For.
Unanimous again.
Thank
Chair.
you. You will do, yeah. Thank you all very much. That is our business. But before we leave the meeting, it was remiss of me not to introduce our new team leader, who has replaced Andrew Ferguson. And this is Eileen Jones. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you again. And I hope that today, this afternoon's meeting has been something that, you know, has been enjoyed, and look forward to, well, New Year now. Yeah, thank you. All right, so